Well, greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Happy to be here with you. Here on this YouTube channel and also on my website, richarddolanmembers.com, I have been talking for quite a bit of time about the ongoing and now very rapidly progressing global revolution. I think it's important to call this thing for what it is, and I think global revolution is quite accurate. I don't think this is hyperbole. I think it's more of a matter of using accurate language to describe things that are actually going on. Phrases like the Great Reset, Build Back Better. We're so used to these examples. Remember George Carlin used to talk about soft language. Great Reset, Build Back Better. These are euphemisms, and they seem perfectly designed to dull our thought, not to sharpen our thought. I mean, build back better. Let's get real. All right, so the Great Reset does sound a little bit more dramatic, but it still doesn't really hit the mark. And besides, even though the devil himself, that is Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, coined the phrase. In fact, let's pull up Mr. Schwab here. I got some visuals here I'm going to share with you. So even though Klaus Schwab coined the phrase, he even titled his book by it, and even though he explicitly states really that his goal is to remake the world into your worst nightmare. Well, okay, he doesn't actually say it's your worst nightmare, but it is. But even so, you try to find corporate establishment, mainstream sources that will actually admit that we are in a great reset. I mean, the guy who's organizing it and directing it calls it that, it's there, and they still, even now, like they still call that a conspiracy theory. Unless they're promoting it, then it's not a conspiracy theory. So with all that, how many people are actually calling what's going on in the world for what it is? It's a global revolution. Or can we even say a globalist revolution? And I don't know how many people really are calling this for what it is. I don't get the sense that there are enough people who are doing this. And I strongly feel that we need to understand that this phenomenon is underway. Now, what I want to do here is to juxtapose what's going on in this globalist revolution. And eventually, down the road, we're going to get into the situation of UFOs, UAP, aliens. And before that, we're going to get into transhumanism. I want to talk about these things and tie them together. Now, okay, I do realize that any random person stumbling across this video might be thinking, we got a live one here. Well, maybe it'll be entertaining. Global revolution and aliens. Okay, right. Well, yeah, so just bear with me and let's just dive in. So first, let's look at the global or globalist revolution part. I think that's a little bit easier. So actually, you could say it's a global globalist revolution. That's a bit of a mouthful, but maybe even that's accurate. But we are in the midst of one. We're in a situation in which the masks are coming off, not off of people in public places, but they're coming off of the global leaders. You got Scott Morrison in Australia. You got Boris Johnson. You got Macron. You got Justin Trudeau. You got Biden. All of these leaders, it's as if they just don't care what we think anymore. Like, these are supposed to be nice liberal leaders, inclusion, toleration. Take a look at some of these headlines. This is only in the last couple of days, for God's sake. This is Australian airport security guards make travelers hand over phones and passwords. Unvaccinated face special tax in Canada. Modi over in India calls the world to arms against crypto. Yeah, they want to take down cryptocurrency. UK PR blitz against chat privacy, fun times, and hassle the unvaxxed. Here's some more. France approves their fun little vaccine pass, graduated from the health pass, now the vaccine pass, banning unvaccinated from their homes, or from public places rather, on and on and on and on. Like, this is, we've moved into full-blown crazy town here. And that's only the last couple of days, all right? So I can only conclude that we're looking at a full court press. This is full speed ahead, right? It's a situation in which, there's absolutely no way not a chance that all of these policies of nearly 190 nations are just randomly arrive at the exact same policy, the exact same slogans, and all of that. And at the exact timing. You've got Canadian truckers and now U.S. truckers almost within a week of each other that will not be able to go over the border if they're unvaccinated. It's like, this is pure insanity. So there's obviously coordination going on here. All right. And what it tells me is that in the minds of the globalist leaders who really are taking their marching orders from essentially Davos, World Economic Forum, hey, let's throw in Bilderberg and any of the other masters of our universe groups that meet in secret and make these decisions, because that's what they do, that they've made the decision that there cannot be any failure on this. This must go through. There must not be any more dissent on this. That's why the censorship continues to come down hard all the time. Literally every day we get these new draconian measures. They come in from some part of the world, and it's just shocking, just like I was showing you. We're entering a period, we've entered, let's say, a period of what we can call even mass psychosis, a mass mental illness, delusion. We're flooded all the time with negative emotions, with fear, anger, hatred, anxiety. It drives people to panic. And, you know, no one can survive for a long period of time in that state of mind. You can't do it. And what's going to happen if this continues, if this is not stopped, we will move toward full-blown global totalitarianism, even more than what's already before us now. And beyond, because people are just going to want to end the madness, to be like, I can't take the panic anymore. I can't take the waves of constant fear. It's like we're in some bizarre, sick psychological experiment. Fear, then a little bit better, then more fear, and then it gets a little calm. It's like, this is a great way to break a human mind. And this is exactly what is happening around the world. And beyond this, I'm going to argue in this presentation that what we are seeing is an active attempt to transform human nature itself. That's where we're getting into the transhumanist part of this. Right? One of the transformations that's not transhumanist, is just really awful, I think, is going to involve transforming once free, independent, sovereign citizens into childlike consumers who must be ruled and who must obey. That's an important transformation that we are seeing happening around us wherever you look. And I also think that those people who are ruling at the very top, like, they are possessed of their own delusions. I think the power feeds their ego, their narcissism, and giving them this belief that they are entitled to rule, right? They get their mass compliance through fear, 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 fear. And when people become afraid, they lose their previous sense of ethics. Those ethics can bend, those ethics can break. Logic's not going to work against those deep-seated fears. And especially they're not going to work if they are being whipped up by a powerful, all-pervasive propaganda system. And they are especially, logic will not work if people are isolated from each other by being bombarded with propaganda. That's our own form of solitary confinement. Mental conditioning is easier that way. Also, it makes it even tougher when families are broken up, as they so often are these days. So you break those primary ties. And it's especially difficult to fight this system when the very technologies that are used to enslave us are so entirely addictive that we want to keep using them. And especially so when an enemy has been identified and demonized, as we are now seeing every single day in this society. So as crisis after crisis overwhelms us, the solution of order becomes attractive. People become willing to surrender their freedoms, those freedoms they once believed in. Hey, it was only 2 years ago when we were in the before times. I used to think the before times were pre 9/11. Well, okay, update. The before times were before 2020. And it wasn't long ago when at least it seemed that people, at least more people, believed in maintaining their freedoms. But that's going away. And what's going to happen if we're not careful is that the booby prize that we're going to get will be a false freedom. It won't be real freedom. It's going to be like fantasy escapism in a digital world. And that digital world is going to be even more carefully monitored than our world is today. And it'll probably be monitored by hyper-intelligent algorithms. And it'll also will be a system that will know how to feed our ongoing addictions for fantasy, escapism, and any other kind of ephemeral pleasures you can think about. That's not a good way to maintain a global system or a global economy, frankly, not in the long term. I don't know if it can. The solution might be, either to transform the human population even further. We'll get into that. Because I don't think the solution is going to be for our vaunted leaders to say, oh, well, let's give people a little more freedom so that they can become normal human beings again. That may be for a small select portion of the population that still is considered necessary to work. And I think that portion is becoming smaller and smaller as every year goes by. So, but here's what I want to say. Everything that I've just been talking about, I'm going to suggest to you and actually argue that this has been in the planning and slow execution for actually a pretty long time. I'm just going to show you we got some old time foundations here: Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie, Ford Foundation. There's a long history. I've been studying up on this a little bit more lately. We've got a century going back to the 1920s, really the end of World War I, where those types of foundations, founded by the biggest money in the world, made it their goal to ally themselves with, how do we put this? I guess what we can call progressive sociological, psychological, and social sciences of that era, all in the name of progress. And, I think it's been very common, like where people will wonder, even to this day, why do wealthy people like George Soros fund these radical left of center disruptive organizations? Because they're not friendly to capitalism. Soros is a capitalist. Why did the Rockefeller Foundation for the last 100 years fund all kinds of very, you could say, left of center, social progressive studies that were essentially designed to destroy family relationships, but to liberate the individual? And this is a long story. Why? And I think the answer is because elite capitalist financial money is, in fact, has a natural ally in the modern progressivist movement for one specific reason. Both are motivated to destroy the old order and to destroy the old institutions that stand in the way. On the one hand, for the progressivist ideal, what I would call a utopian idea of human perfection and the ultimate liberation of the individual from the shackles of tradition and social control, right? I mean, this is an old story. This goes back even before the 1920s. Goes back to the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, where people realized, oh, wow, there's this science that actually is better to explain the world than our old-fashioned superstitions and religions. That morphed into social theorists in the 19th century who said, you know what, we understand the world scientifically. We can also transfer that to understanding human society scientifically. And for them, it was all about this idea. We've liberated ourselves in the knowledge of the physical world. We can do the same with human society and create what they called the perfectibility of man. It's a very important concept for these last 200 years, and it hasn't gone away. It's just changed the wording a little bit, but the concept is still the same. It is, the individual must be freed, fully freed from the shackles of tradition, from the shackles of, superstitious social control. So that's the progressive motivation for destroying the old order. But here's the thing. The upper echelon of the global capitalists and financiers, they also want to break down that system, that very same system, and for the different reason, because they want every single thing in this world to become commodified and owned by them. All products, all processes, all people, all behaviors, all transactions, everything can become commodified. And what stands in the way for them is the old order. That means nations. Nations get in the way of this. Why do you want to have all these national laws when you can just eliminate that and have transnational corporations run everything? They need to destroy that. Families are a huge problem for them, because that's a loyalty that is organic. It's a loyalty that's not commodified. It's a loyalty that gets in the way also of the power of the state, which is allied with the corporations as well. It means getting rid of all old kinds of relationships, all old beliefs. So, and this is where the Marxists really have always had it right about capitalism, by the way, which is that capitalism, and Marx wrote this himself, is the ultimate transformer of human society. It is the ultimate revolutionary process. So that's a really important thing to recognize. Capitalism is not ever about stability. Think about the capitalist society that we've had for the past essentially 200 years. It's been anything but stable. It's been one revolution technologically after another, and it's been amazing, been a hell of a ride. We've got a lot of nice goodies here. We're in materialist heaven. However, it has created, in my opinion anyway, a lot of neuroses and psychological disruption, and we're seeing that here now. But anyway, so I think it's just important that we understand this is why the progressive left and the elitist right work very well together. And this has been the case for a good long century now. Those corporations want to commodify everything, and that means everything has to be broken down. This is much more profound than a communist revolution where, I don't know, the Bolsheviks seize power of the state, and they do transform social relations. But I think what we're seeing is much, much more powerful. Let me show you an image here. This is from a century ago. Many of you have heard of Edward Bernays, the founder of modern public relations. So these are advertisements to get women to smoke about 100 years ago. And look what these are saying. Believe in yourself. An ancient prejudice has been removed. Progress. Ladies, liberate yourself. Smoke. And in fact, cigarettes were referred to for a while as torches of freedom. All right? Torches of freedom. I mean, there's so many of these types of ads. There's Bernays calling propaganda the executive arm of the invisible government. He wasn't kidding. And that was 100 years ago. But that's just one example of how, smoking 100 years ago was seen as extremely progressive, extremely liberating. And really all that happened is that a new market, the entire female market, was handed over to the tobacco industry for whom Bernays was working, and explicitly created these campaigns. I mean, you talk about a head fake, all right? But this is our world. Destroy the old institutions, including the family, old superstitions, that means religions, old ways of behavior, traditional norms, i.e., the patriarchy or anything else. Liberation nowadays from biology, liberation always of the individual from anything having to do with the past, anything to prevent their ultimate freedom. And again, it's to break our age-old instinctive behaviors. So one other thing I just want to point out here is in the 20th century, there was a dissenting opinion about this from a number of people. This is Carl Gustav Jung, a really great thinker in my view. Jung, he was a dissenter. He was a psychological pioneer, obviously, but he was different from almost every other major psychologist of the 20th century in that he didn't seem to have been an atheist, and he moreover was a believer in well, I don't know what his exact spiritual connections were, but he believed in the long-standing instincts that human beings developed over long periods of time. And Jung's attitude was, we've got hard wiring innately in us. And if you just think you're going to rewire a human being, with a couple of propaganda campaigns or some social engineering experiments, you're going to mess things up. You're going to create a lot of psychological problems. I mean, the family is one example. Jung didn't know this at the time, because we didn't have enough archaeological, paleontological evidence. But the family as a unit is older than human beings themselves, or older than Homo sapiens. It goes back more than 4 million years when we were just standing up apes with a lot of fur all over our bodies. There was pair bonding then, which is a foundation for what we are. We're hardwired. Jung had another idea, and this is actually interesting, and I think it'd be cool to explore, which was that he believed that we had a variety of instincts. I mean, there's a food instinct, there's a sex drive instinct, but he also believed that we had a spiritual instinct, like something that he believed was innate within human consciousness. Whatever one's concept of God would be, Jung felt, if you start breaking with these types of instincts, including a spiritual instinct, you're probably going to do really bad things to people. It's not good for us. And Jung was heavily criticized for this, by the way, by a lot of the other leading psychological minds. They would say, you're reactionary, you're not a full proponent of human freedom or liberation. And so he was really out of step with the progressive psychological and sociological theories of the time. That's a little bit of background. Let's move into the future of where we're going. We're looking at the breakdown and reassembly of the human being into a commodified unit without an actual identity. I think that's really what we're looking at. Or let's say a fractured identity with essentially no ability to resist the state, no ability to resist corporate power, because the fractured individual has no roots. He's got no sense of permanence, no organic or intrinsic identity, no natural allies of support any longer. The individual can take whatever identity it wants in the future world that we're creating on whatever day of the week you choose. That's supposed to be freedom, but it's actually nothing other than the fracturing of a human personality, the fracturing of a human psyche. I mean, look, you can't really change who you are. You can destroy your sense of identity, but how much meaning and power does that really give you? Are human beings really that easy to remake, to re-engineer, to redesign? Well, I would say probably not without severe psychological destruction. But wait, there's more, unfortunately, much more. So I want to show you another slide. These are some of the main developments of the world that we are in now and will be continuing to move into. And I just threw this kind of together earlier today. It's a pretty good list. It could be better. I mean, global pervasive surveillance, obviously, population control in every way imaginable at this point. Nonstop propagandizing, a redefinition of human identity, universal facial recognition, voice recognition, social credit scoring. Just remember a few years ago when we first heard about this from China, and we were like, wow, is this going to happen here? Well, it's basically here. Not formally, not legally, but we're getting awfully close. And then, crazy technology like Neuralink or other types of brain-computer interfaces that are being developed right now. There's the metaverse, which we've all been hearing about lately, and things that have been around, talked about even longer, like future total immersive virtual reality, which I assume will become part of the metaverse, the world that you are going to be expected to live in. This is going to be your world, all right? We're moving into a world which even will have greater power than now to big pharma and genetically modified food industry. We're also looking at massive, and I mean massive, employment downsizing. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Very strong artificial intelligence. And then mind reading technologies. Absolutely. Population profiling. It amazes me that the movie Minority Report came out in the mid-90s. You talk about foresight. That's kind of amazing. And then, of course, the genetics, CRISPR technology and gene editing and the like. I mean, absolutely just nuts. But I want to come back to a couple of things here. So first of all, the employment thing. And think about the employment situation and strong artificial intelligence. All right, just those two things. Actually, let me move on to the next slide. I'm going to give you a different example by way of doing this. So I'm a bit of I'm not a chess pro, but I like chess. I've enjoyed it my whole life. I even have a couple of chess books. Got a great book by the great Jose Raul Capablanca from over a century ago. A couple of other chess books. It's fun. And occasionally I will follow what's going on in the chess world just to relax. So a couple of years ago, some of you know about this, Google DeepMind developed something known as AlphaZero. So what is AlphaZero? AlphaZero is it's a chess program, but it's not an ordinary chess program. So I'll give you an example. So the world chess champion today is Magnus Carlsen. He's a genius. I think his chess ranking, they all get numbers. He's just under 3,000. I think he's like 2,900, something like that. The great Bobby Fischer in the late 60s, early 70s was at around, I think, 27, close to 2,700. Gary Kasparov was 2,800. You get the idea. So there's a chess engine, a chess program that chess masters use to practice their skills. It's called Stockfish. This is a standard brute force programmed chess algorithm that's really good. It does, I don't know, like 1 million moves a second or some crazy number, but it's not artificially intelligent, but it's good. So Stockfish's chess ranking, I think, is like 3,400. So it could crush Magnus Carlsen, no problem. So Google DeepMind developed a chess learning program called AlphaZero. That wasn't programmed by any chess masters. It started with no knowledge whatsoever. It's a learning program, and it was just fed like practically every single chess game known to man, I suppose. And within, I'm trying to remember, within a couple of hours, maybe a day, but I think less than 1 day, AlphaZero was played Stockfish and absolutely destroyed Stockfish. All right, which was the strongest chess program in the world. So AlphaZero, a learning program, completely obliterated this long-standing program. So just like stop and think about this for a second, right? So, and by the way, I checked out a couple of those games, and what you find with AlphaZero, it's not just that it's better than Stockfish, it's more creative. It's true genius level chess. And in fact, it's so good that chess grandmasters are looking at this AlphaZero games, and it's revolutionizing openings and mid games and end games due to the creativity of this. It's actually like chess. People were getting to the point where they thought, chess is just the same old, like all the moves, the opening, all of this. Not anymore. AlphaZero has blown all that out of the water, and just in a couple of hours of learning. All right. So that's the power of a really powerful learning artificial intelligence. Now take that and just ask yourself, there's a lot of very highly intellectual jobs in this world. There's doctors, there's attorneys, there's accountants, there's a lot of jobs that require intellectual labor. There's going to be a point, and I don't know when, but it's not going to be that long. You got to ask yourself, when learning AI algorithms almost all at once just sweep in to all of these industries and make redundant all of those or many, let us say even most of those occupations. Now you might say, well, those accountants, those lawyers, they'll just use the generative AI for their own, but ask yourself, really? And I think many more people will just use the programs themselves. A lot of people are going to go out of work. And when is this going to happen? I don't know, but this is not distant future here. There cannot in any way be that this is distant future. But there's even more to this than that, because we're standing right at the cliff here. All right. Let's take the concept of strong generative AI, like an AlphaZero, and turn it on ourselves as a society. Think of social engineering as a game. Chess is a game. Chess has rules, right? Within that, it's got strategy and tactics. Well, if you're a military and you're doing war games, that has certain rules, not hard and fast rules, but it's got predictive behavior. It's got tactics. It's got strategies and goals. So surely we can assume that the powerful militaries of the world are right now trying to develop their own version of Alpha Zero for military purposes. That will involve all types of hybrid warfare, from psychological operations, propaganda, but also not just against other nations. But can we really think that powerful organizations, governments, corporations do not want to use this against populations? All right. So think of population control. Think of social engineering as a game. All right. It's got, I don't know about hard and fast rules, but it's got rules of a sort. And human behavior has a lot of predictabilities about it. And if you are developing these programs that, you want to game plan your strategy, what laws can we act? Let's play it out. If we enact this law, what's the likely result going to be? If we change the economy in this way, what's the likely population result going to be here? If we change certain education features, can we game plan this out? I think the answer is yes. I think they can do that. If we do this to social media, to Facebook or to Twitter, what will be the likely reaction? All right. If we change physical controls and restrictions over people, what's the likely result? All right. These programs, they're smarter than we are. Again, I remind you to think of the Alpha Zero chess. It is absolute, you could almost say godlike level of chess. And it learned it like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of smart people right now who are looking at social engineering very much as a game in the same way. And well, it's like, it makes it even worse because they're playing the game on us. They may be doing this game on us right now. All right. And we may not even know. It's like going into the ring with Mike Tyson in 1986, and you don't even know the bell rings. And the next thing you know, there's a left hook and you're on the canvas and you're not getting up. Like, it's very difficult to play this game if you don't even know you're in it. So that's the problem. And the reason I think that the masks are coming off the global leaders right now, one reason, I think there may be several, but one is that they must see, with the dramatic probably soon to be loss of massive amount of jobs, there's going to be a lot of what Henry Kissinger called useless eaters around in this world. There's already a growing number. It's becoming a problem, the restless many, and they've got to be managed. The massive population are going to have to be managed. They've got to be cowed. They've got to be beaten down now, because better do it now than when all the other shit hits the fan. They don't want that. They want to do it now. I think this is one reason. And the other reason, I think, is simply that the technological means have now finally come into place where this can be done. Right? The ability digitally to control populations wasn't really quite in place even 10 years ago, but it's coming fully into place just about now. There are obviously pockets of resistance, but I think we need to recognize that things are going to start happening really fast, really soon. All right. So that's what we're dealing with. Near term, live in the metaverse. Look for Ready Player One. Remember that movie, that book. The real world turns out to really suck, and the future is in fantasy and thrill seeking in virtual reality, which, by the way, will only further increase the destruction of family bonds. Obviously, how can it help destroy close relationships, further fracturing of the human psyche, human relationships? All of that's going to get worse, not better, because this is structurally the world that we are creating, leading ultimately, one can assume, to some kind of total immersive virtual reality in the metaverse, cognitive implants. And think about this. You got cognitive implants like what Elon wants to put in your head, or someone else will put in your head, and they'll sell it as something really awesome, by the way. Like, yeah, you want to be part of the cool crowd. Download any kind of information you want. Of course, if it can be downloaded, can it be uploaded and read, copied, pasted? And if it can be read, can it be censored? Can it be edited by forces that are not you. This may sound crazy, but look, we all know this is actually a genuinely, not only a possible reality, but I'm going to say a likely reality. There's going to be an ongoing attempt. I don't know when, but there will be an attempt to manage private mind-to-mind communications through brain-computer interface between individuals. I could be talking to you and sending you a thought, but maybe it gets edited along the way because certain things are not allowed to be said. Is this possible? Of course it's possible. I mean, probably possible. We're talking about the ability to transfer thoughts through brain-computer interfaces, and all that's necessary for editing is an intermediary. And if you've got a super highly intelligent algorithm like an AlphaZero, but it's only designed for human communications, well, it can do it. It can handle it. Will your thoughts even be your own thoughts? All of this will create a new human being. And here's one final question I'm going to ask you about this before we move on. What will people even be useful for? Really? You know, for years, I used to have this little theory of 4 classes of human beings in our world. Think of a pyramid, and at the very capstone of the pyramid are the owners of our world. And just a little sliver above them, we can call the managers, people who make it all happen. Then you got a big chunk of people, which I used to call the worker bees. You know, those are the folks who really get everything done in the society. And then on the bottom, people who are unemployable, people who in the minds of the folks at the top are expendable. Well, what I think is happening is that expendable portion is going to continue to swallow up the worker bee class. And what are you going to do with these people? Well, for maybe the short term, you stick them in the metaverse, let them have whatever kind of toxins and drugs and whatever to just let them live their fantasy life, keep them out of way. But eventually, if you're one of the rulers and you think, well, you know, these are all commodities, all these people, their behaviors are all commodified. Every transaction in the metaverse becomes commodified. They are commodities. You start to think like that. Maybe you're just going to think, well, they're redundant. We need to find a way to eliminate a lot of this population. And I'm not saying kill them, but I don't know, maybe people will be encouraged for mass sterilization. They'll get a little stimulus check if they sterilize and not have kids. And, you know, the thing is, I'm sure there's many people today that'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful. Because we've been taught to hate ourselves. We've been taught to hate our species. That's all. I think this is part of a psychological operation going back a full century. So I used to predict all of this sort of dystopia for happening between like 2040 and 2050, you know, basically 20 years or more from now. Well, I think that needs to be revised. I think I was way too conservative. And I think this decade, we're going to see a massive shift to a full-on, what I have been calling now for about a year or so, a little more, the 4th stage of humanity. And I'm just going to ask, some of you have heard me talk about this before, but I'm going to ask for your forbearance and just let me take about 5 minutes and describe it again. Now, I love all of human history and I love studying it. It's important to me. I don't know why, I'm obsessed by it. Not just UFOs. When I look back on the long history of Homo sapiens, I see 3 fundamental stages that we have had for most of our existence. Yeah, by the way, the earliest fossil we now have of a fully human skull is more than 300,000 years old. It's from Morocco, where all the other skulls are kind of in Eastern Africa. This is kind of out in a different place, but it's human. It's a human skull. It's kind of amazing. Maybe they'll find even older ones. Who knows? But we've been around for a while in this form of a species. And for nearly all of that time, we were hunters and gatherers for all this green bar here for our period. Okay, that's what we did. You know, get a big sharpened stick and you stab a huge animal with it. Or, you know, you fashion together whatever clothing you can and you use fire. Only about 10,000 years ago, even a little less, around then, we began to really develop some sedentary agriculture and farming and animal domestication. And that's the agricultural revolution. That's that little yellow spot. That's our history right there when we started all of that. And that's when we, really got cities and we developed writing and the wheel and pottery and metallurgy and all of these amazing things that gave us civilization, ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, all of that. And then that sliver of red on the end is the last 300 years. That's stage 3, the scientific revolution. It's quite recent. Here's some images. This is the hunter-gatherers, an artist reconstruction of maybe a hunter-gatherer group somewhere in Europe, maybe 10,000, 15,000 years ago. Hunter-gatherers today in Africa, living fundamentally the same style of existence. Or agriculture. This is an artist rendition of the earliest agriculture in the Near East from, roughly 8, 9, 10,000 years ago. And here's an artist image of 19th century peasants. Fundamentally, the same form of life. Clothing's a little bit better here, but it's basically the same kind of life, working the land, working with animals in the same fundamental way. And then stage 3, this is London, I think late Victorian, possibly Edwardian, and London before the world ended in 2020. So this could be any city, frankly. And they all kind of look, the stages are similar. And this is why I wanted to show you that. But I believe that we are now entering a 4th stage, and I've been calling it the Transhumanist Stage. And I'll just point out here, human beings have been changing all along. I realize some people don't believe in evolutionary theory. I do. I subscribe to it. I think it makes the most sense for me. But if you don't, just bear with me for a minute. But what we do know in terms of archaeological evidence is that even our recent ancestors of 20, 30,000 years ago, fully human, we were different from them. They had larger brains. They had greater bone mass. They had greater bone density. They had greater muscle mass. They were taller. They were a little more badass looking than we are, frankly. Why did our brains shrink? Well, that's actually evolution in progress. And the evolution is because once we started moving into different kinds of communities, we actually did not require the full brain capacity that our ancestors did to be able to survive in a much more difficult world. We didn't need to be quite as powerful. And keep in mind, evolution does not always mean better in every way. It simply means adapting. It just means that you physiologically and psychologically, mentally adapt to the new environment in which you find yourself. Think about wild sheep versus domesticated sheep. Domesticated sheep have 1/3 the brain capacity of wild sheep. They're tame. They're totally different because we did that to them. So we actually haven't realized, but we do it to ourselves as well, domesticated. Doesn't mean that we're worse than our ancestors, but we have adapted to live in this settled society. Now consider this. We are going through vastly greater dramatic changes in our environment. We're creating these changes ourselves. Rapid change is now the norm. Vastly faster change. We all see this. And this has led many people, not just me, to indicate that we are really moving into, there'll be like, this is some artist's conception of a new human of the future. They're seeing this as a distant future. I'm not seeing that as a distant future. I think we're going to be in a situation very soon where through CRISPR technology and genetic engineering, designer babies, you're going to see people selecting for more intelligence. And if you select for more intelligence, that comes at a cost. The cost comes at the cost of the rest of your body because, frankly, brains are expensive in terms of energy. I never played the game of, was it Civilization or Age of Empires? My son played that. I used to watch them. But I do know that's all about resource allocation. You put more into this, you got to put less into that. And it's really with our bodies as well. If you want a really super powerful brain, it's probably going to come at the expense of your body, most likely, unless you want to ingest a lot more energy. And that's difficult. You need a lot more food. Okay, so just think this through. You're going to have a future genetically engineered species, because we're clearly moving toward that, that's going to be selecting for intelligence more and more. So I do think that's going to be where we're headed. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take, but probably shorter than we think. Maybe a few centuries to get to that level of what that artist envisioned. But even before we get to that level, we're going to see vastly tremendous changes before then. Another thing that we're going to be seeing, I believe. Oh, well, okay, let me just jump ahead to the alien connection here. Just so, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to recognize that that image of a future human looks a little bit like all of the depictions that abductees and experiencers have described of gray aliens. I'm not saying that we're going to become gray aliens, but that this might be a morphology or a type that actually does happen due to artificial genetic selection in various species. Another thing that we may be dealing with is the development of a hive mind. This is some creepy stuff I'm going to show you here. This is a man, look at that picture. This is a man named Gerald Feinberg from the late 60s, and he really does look kind of crazy. I think he was sort of crazy, but he was also a genius, a truly crazed genius. But before I talk about the hive mind idea, this is a man who coined the term tachyon as a hypothetical faster than light particle, like super intelligent man. He predicted the existence of the muon neutrino. I had to look all this up. This is on his wiki page. Advocated for cryonics as a public service, that is, freeze the dead. He wrote a foreword to a book by Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, psychic explorations. Feinberg was interested in that. But Feinberg also wrote a book called The Prometheus Project, which I've got here. I read this book. It was on the recommendation of one of the members of my site, and I'm very grateful for that recommendation. So here's Feinberg in the late 1960s, right? Talking about the most, honestly, deranged, crazed, utopian, transhumanist future that I can possibly imagine, and talking explicitly in the late 1960s about the attractiveness of humanity developing a hive mind. In the 60s, the era of turn on, tune in, drop out, do your own thing, man. Not Feinberg. He's talking about a hive mind. Now, it's possible that Feinberg was totally keyed into the ARPANET project, which was the origin of the internet from the early 1960s. He probably did know a lot about that. And he may have known a few other things that might have been coming down the road for all we know. But this guy was looking into the future. And by the way, he is a real inspiration to a lot of the transhumanist futurists of today, Ray Kurzweil and all the others. This is Feinberg. So he's talking about a hive mind. And you ask yourself, how close can this actually happen? Well, of course it can happen. Of course it can happen. And of course, I think this is the direction that we are looking. I don't think that most ideological progressives are saying, oh yeah, great, hive mind. I think the corporatists at the top of the food chain, I think they're thinking it. I think that the rulers, the power elite that believes they should be ruling us, I think they would be quite happy with it. Not for them, but maybe for us. But it may be promoted as something really, really awesome and amazing. I mean, Feinberg said this could promise to be amazing. He's like, you would essentially, it would almost be like the Borg in Star Trek. You become part of the collective, and you partake of everyone's cognitive input, and you provide your own. I can't possibly see how this can work, and it may not work like that in the future. However, here's how a hive mind can be actually created. It can be created if everyone's plugged in, everyone's neuralinked, and you've got a very highly intelligent algorithm, like an AlphaZero, but for population control, that's managing everything, managing your all the neurological inputs you're getting. I mean, this is like Matrix almost, but you're willingly doing it. You go into the metaverse, and there's a high advanced intelligence that manages all of the stimuli. So even if you're not literally sharing all of your consciousness with everyone else, you are still being you're being gamed, you're being controlled by an intelligence vastly greater than you that will lead you where it wants you to go. I think that's what we're really looking at, because we're divorcing ourselves from our natural world. And another thing that's happening that's actually, all of these thoughts made me think one day, like, are we turning ourselves into the aliens that we believe have been here, or at least some of those aliens? If you've been studying UFOs a long time, you study the idea of alien encounters, you come to understand that there seem to be a variety of these types out there. They're not all little gray aliens, okay. But they all appear to have some level of what we would call telepathy, or at least that seems to be the case. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of individualism when you get into these stories. You get into the accounts of people who've had experiences. Not at all. There does seem to be a hive mind factor going on with some of these beings, with all of these beings. And there's a weird thing, and I'm going to talk about emotion here now. Most of these aliens do not outwardly express emotions the way that we do. Now, there are many cases in which people who have encounters with them will claim to experience deep love or fear or whatever. My personal opinion on this matter is that they're experiencing deep love because that's a great way to manipulate them. Like, how is it that you would feel intense love for a gray insect-looking being that would normally make you, freak out if you saw it in your full consciousness? But instead you're feeling intense love for this thing. There's something wrong here, seems to me. And I think there's cognitive and emotional manipulation that they're doing. But in terms of their emotions, it doesn't seem to me that these beings are experiencing intense emotions the way humans traditionally have. Well, guess what? Looks to me that we are in a society that is draining us of our emotional life, destroying our emotional life. I think this is clearly happening. Emotions, I think, are being rooted out. Look around you. Don't look at TV, movies, TV shows or movies or ads. All of that is just propaganda. Yeah, on movies and in TV shows, everyone's happy and very emotive. In the real world, when was the last time you're walking in the street and a stranger just looks up and says, "Hi, how are you?" This actually was much more common in eras not that long ago. People, I think, were naturally friendlier than we have become today. And it's I think a lot of factors have gone into this, but the end result is that our relationships are much more transactional. They're not organic. And they're less emotional, because that's not professional anymore, right? People, I think we train ourselves because we want to seem like we're smart, so we don't get emotional anymore. That's bad. It's like, you got to be smart. You got to, like, not show emotion. Well, yeah. So the result is we're siphoning out our very humanity. And I think, here's one image I'll share. I just found this and I thought, yeah, this is kind of perfect. This really expresses the world we're developing pretty well, it looks to me. Stark background, not a whole lot, mask up, don't show your face, don't look at the person next to you, and stare into your phone. That's your world. That's becoming our world. And I think that's horrible, to be honest with you. I think it's absolutely terrible. It's not a world that I think any of us really want. So yes, I think we need to ask, are we turning ourselves into the aliens that may already be here? The other thing I just want to say about UFOs, I'm getting toward wrap up here. I need another 10 minutes or so, I think. We need to ask ourselves, I've done this a few times, I'm not going to dive in so much here, but I just want to raise this issue. What are these beings doing every single day? They are seen around the world. And again, if you're someone listening and you don't know much about UFOs, well, it's a bit of a learning curve. But one of my favorite websites that I like to check out frequently is the National UFO Reporting Center, run by the excellent Peter Davenport. He has been a clearinghouse for raw UFO reports for many, many years. And on any given year, there's many thousands of reports that go into that site. And you would be surprised. You go check out the reports there at the quality of many of them. Now, it's true, these are not typically investigated. They're raw. They're uninvestigated, and you can therefore say, well, we don't really know if they're valid or not. But look, you go in there, use your brains, and you read the reports. Some of these are clearly very detailed. They're very articulate. And I just think it's very difficult to dismiss all of these. There's so many. And what these people are describing over and over again. I mean, some of them describe what are clearly abduction type experiences, and others just describe objects seen hovering low at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning over residential neighborhoods. Very, very stealthy, but seen. Someone goes out, they can't sleep, or they want to have a cigarette and they're outside, whatever, and they see it. Something is going on, and it's worldwide, and it has been going on for a long time now. What are they doing? And when I think about the UFO or UAP phenomenon, and I think about the global revolution transhuman phenomenon, these are, think of those Venn diagrams, the overlapping circles, right? One is a very huge thing that has global, monumental impact, as does the other thing. They're both of profound importance to our world. Is it realistic to think that they have no relationship to each other whatsoever? Well, I don't think so. I think it's much more likely that there is a relationship. So, what is that? What is the nature of that relationship? Well, I don't know how much we want to explore that here, but we can ask, are they aware of our transformation? I'm assuming they are quite aware of our transformation. Do they support this transformation, or are they concerned about this transformation? Are they trying to stop it? Well, if they're trying to stop it, they're not having much success. Are they trying to accelerate it? Do they want this transformation? Maybe we're going to become just like them or more like them. Maybe they think that's a good thing. Are they in any way engaging in any level of manipulation to make this happen? There's a question too. I don't have the answers to this. This is just spitballing speculation. But they are valid questions to ask, even if we don't have all the answers to them at this time. Now, is all of what this is one hell of a black pill I'm throwing out at you. And I'm sorry. Look, I don't want to be a downer. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun. And I try all the time to find reasons not to believe the things that I'm saying to you here. It's not fun. I would like to be wrong. Is this inevitable? Is this future awful dystopia that I'm looking at? Is this an inevitability? Well, it has clearly been promoted for a century. And I'm not saying that the folks in the 1920s knew explicitly that there was going to be an internet and they knew there was going to be a metaverse. No, clearly not. But what they did want was to move the world in a certain direction, one that they thought was progress, one in which they thought we can remake human beings. That they absolutely believed. Create a new humanity, a new man, a new human. Oh, yeah, they were all about that. And that they were all about destroying the old order. Absolutely. Now, you can ask, is this inevitable, however? What if all the other species in our part of the galaxy are the same way? Do they all have a hive mind? So are we just doing what all the other alien civilizations have already done? Is this the norm? What if this is the norm? Right? How does this get stopped if we want to stop this? There's resistance groups around the world right now. They're protesting against the vax mandates and all the other related stuff. And, maybe they will have success in the near term to stop some of this madness, to stop some of the totalitarian technocracy lockdown. Okay, it's totally possible. And we want that. I want that to succeed. I want them to succeed in their resistance. But let's get real here. Let's just have a reality check. They stopped that. We're still in a global capitalist system in which those people with all the money still want their goals met, and they're going to work toward those goals. And they're still going to come in with the metaverse, and you're still going to be probably seduced and sucked into that place and living that world detached from your natural self more and more and more. And then your kids and your grandchildren and so forth. Like, how do you stop this? All right. And if all the other species in the universe are like that, how are we going to compete with them, if you want to use the word compete, if we get out there in some way? Because all these societies, as I see it, this hive mind society means much, much less power and agency for the individual. That's right. But much more power, I think, for the collective. Right. Or rather, not the collective, maybe, but the few who control the collective. Right. The few who control the artificial intelligence and the levers of power, assuming that we can control the AI at all, which I think is quite possible. You know, we've all talked about the singularity, and in which artificial intelligence becomes conscious and maybe tries to do a Terminator scenario on us. You know, maybe that will happen, but it could also go down in different ways. It could also be a situation in which AI develops an incredible level of knowledge on a whole array of things, but is still perhaps amenable to human control. I don't know. I think that's possible. Would the result be any different for most people? And I think the answer is probably no. It would feel the same. Whoever controls the AI and levers of power is going to run the world. So in that situation, I want you to think about this. You've got super incredible artificial intelligence essentially running the infrastructure of the world. You've got, I don't know, billions of people plugged into their little matrix, you know, maybe taking time out to use the bathroom, or maybe having themselves attached to a bathroom and sucking in their gruel, their genetically modified, low-level nutrition, but just enough to keep them alive gruel. Because after all, they're not in a position anymore to demand better food, because they're wards of the state getting their UBI and living in their metaverse. Let's face it. So they're just, can this happen? Of course this can happen. So in that situation, when the AI becomes more important than the individuals, more important than people, what's going to happen then? Well, we'll just leave that as it is. Can such a system even last? This is true nightmare dystopia beyond anything that Orwell or even Huxley wrote about. Way beyond, way worse. Can such a system survive? I don't know. Maybe it can break down. I would say it might be possible that it could break down, maybe even likely. I don't know. It's worth thinking about. But I guess what I have been trying to say here is that the problem of global revolution that is happening now is I think we've all been aware that it's a big problem, but I'm going to suggest to you that it's a bigger problem than people have even realized up till now. It's bigger, it's worse. So, how do we deal with this? Well, here's a couple of things I've been thinking about. One thing I hate, I hate false hope. And I don't like when people will just throw out, well, we all have to just love each other and be nice to each other. But here's what I do believe. The breakdown in this world, first of all, it's not liberal versus conservative. We're not really understanding things. I mean, I guess, maybe we've changed the meaning of these, but really it's globalization versus anti-globalization. And I believe that every single breakdown, every problem, every crisis, every culture crisis is essentially that. It's the forces of globalization versus the forces that oppose the globalization revolution. And that's how we need to understand it, because it's not just liberals and conservatives. It's you've got the elite money at the top. They want that every bit as much. They want to destroy the old order too, for their purposes, because again, they want to turn you fully into a commodity and all of your behaviors to become commodified and monetized for them. for them. That's the goal. Now, so solutions. Well, one obvious that stares us in the face is we need to form as many genuine organic communities as we can. We need to get together with actual people. You look at the world around us now, you've got all of these condos and apartment complexes going up, all these 700 square foot places that have hundreds of apartments in them, and no one ever talks to each other. They're all stuck in their own little cubby hole. What the hell is that? That's not a normal human life. We got to break that. We've got to find a way actually to meet with people in person. All right? Whatever that means. Whether it's a meetup or a religious organization, if you do that, a community of people who support each other. Human beings, human contact. We got to do that. We've got to remember that communities matter and organic identities matter. Those things that give meaning and stability and satisfaction in our lives, bonds of love and friendship, of loyalty and dedication to higher ethics and a meaningful spirituality. All right? In-person communities. If you have to find them online to start with, okay. But ultimately, it's about with people. Don't isolate. Don't isolate. Also, be aware of alternative narratives to the one you're being instructed to listen to. Help to wake up other people. Keep yourself awake and alert. Don't give in to fear. Do your best to love those people, even those people who you think are against you. You got to do your best here. We're going to win not by negating our humanity, but we only win by embracing the best that is already inside us. We all have a higher self, guys. All right? We do. It's that part of you that knows everything it needs to know. It's inside you. It's usually buried under mountains of emotional crap that block the path to your truest and highest revelations. It's inside you. So you take some quiet time to listen to it. You take some quiet time to talk to it because it's there and you ask for its help. Whatever you believe in the truth of the soul, there's a soul inside you. You can believe it's neurons and chemicals if you want, or you can believe it to be much, much more than that, but it's there. You believe in it and align yourself with that part of you, that highest and best part of you. It will not let you down. That's a start. Remember your best and highest humanity. Jung was right. You've got a spiritual instinct. Don't lose it. We were taught all our lives in this society to lose that instinct, and it was the worst crime perpetrated against us. Let's not let it continue. All right. With that, I believe I have gone long enough into this transaction here with you, a meaningful transaction, an organic transaction, I like to think, and I hope that you found it worthwhile. I really do want to thank all of you for being here. We're in a very, very difficult, challenging time. It's difficult. But we can stand up to it and we can make ourselves proud, and I think we can do that. So let's do our best. With that, I want to thank you for being here, and you know the drill. Like, subscribe if you like what I do. Definitely subscribe to my channel. It's free. And if you really like what I do, subscribe to my website at Richard Dolan Members. I do a lot of work there, put up content there every week, and great community people there, by the way. And that's it. Chin up. Don't despair. Let's keep fighting the good fight. And with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. Catch you all later.